Today's talk is on appreciating life, how to live wisely. And it's supposed to deal with infrequent human rebirth in the context of karma. Now let's start off with this one. Now before I begin, may I ask, how many of you come from the city? I mean your hometown, where you grew up with your family. City? Town included in city, okay? How many of you come from the village near the forest, near the plantations? Just a few people, huh? I'm sure all of you must have seen billboards, advertisements, or photographs of the forest, the beautiful virgin forest, all the tall trees and the undergrowth and the ferns. Have you seen them? Do you think it's beautiful? Right, it's beautiful, isn't it? Wouldn't you love to go to the forest for a retreat? Would you like it if it was part of your camp program to go to Tamanagara? You would, right? Yes. When I was a student in my third year in University, Science Malaysia, Penang, I had a revolution going on in my mind. Somebody introduced me to the way of Tao and the way of Zen. And I was very inspired by the meditative approach and the mystical approach of these two systems of spiritual practice. I was particularly inspired by the Zen masters of old, who used to live in the mountains, at the mountainside, away from human habitation, living alone, writing poetry, painting, calligraphy and brush painting, and contemplating, meditating in their free time. They were also supposed to be self-reliant. They used to plant vegetables around their little hut, and only once in a while would they come down to the village or to town to beg for other sort of food, like maybe rice or salt. I longed for that sort of solitary life of seclusion in the midst of nature. And you can read nowadays also a lot of books and a lot of translations of those Zen masters where they talk about, the beauty of living in seclusion, very close to nature, having a spring nearby and listening to the sound of spring waters as they sit and meditate and write their poems. It sounds very romantic, isn't it? To be near the waterfall, sitting by a huge 200-year-old forest tree, hearing the birds and seeing the butterflies, so being so close to nature. That's the romantic view of what it's like to live with nature. Then in 1979, I decided to become a monk. Soon after I became a monk, I decided to live alone in the forest. I went with a brother monk, Venerable Sujiva, to one of the ulu kampongs in Kedah, at the edge of the forest. We had a hut built for us, literally at the edge of the forest. And after the rains retreat was over, we went our separate ways. Venerable Sujiva went to a further village and he stayed in the cemetery. Actually, we lived near the village which was inhabited by Malaysian Thais. So he went to stay in the Thai cemetery, which is quite different from a Chinese cemetery. In the Thai cemetery, they burn the corpses there and then they just leave the remains in the cemetery. So it can be quite hair-raising if you're not well prepared. So he had a little hut built in the cemetery where you can see skeletons. Then I went to stay at the outskirts of another Thai village. This was really in a jungle area, just nearby a stream. I had to walk down the stream every day to bathe and to do my washing. And they also had a little hut built for me. And the hut was just about 6 feet by 3.5 feet. And when I sat, my head could sometimes touch the roof. It was an little hut. When you stay in the forest, then you begin to realize that all the romantic ideas you have about what it's like in the forest are not really real. There you are infested by all sorts of animals. You have snakes, and then you have caterpillars, you have centipedes, you have ants, you have termites coming to eat up my little hut. Worse still are snakes. You find snakes all over the place. That was more than 20 years ago. About 5 years ago, I started a monk training center in the hills of Taiping called Sasanaraka Buddhist Sanctuary. It is built at the edge of a virgin forest, but we have electricity and we have internet connection. Modern forest monks. But still, with such modern facilities, even though our kutis are very modern, and sometimes visitors would come thinking that there was a temple up in the hills, and they will ask us, where is the temple? Because we do not have any buildings that look like a temple. They are all very functionally designed and also very well designed. In fact, some visitors who came up would ask us how much it costs to rent a chalet. In spite of all such modern facilities, we are still attacked by mice, by termites, by ants. Almost every kuti is infested with ants. Sometimes it's even impossible to take a nap in the afternoon because they'll be crawling all over your body. And not to talk about mosquitoes, of course. Even though our kutis are covered up by mosquito netting, we have sandflies. And sandflies are so small that even mosquito nettings cannot prevent them from coming into the kuti. So they will attack us, and those who have an allergy to sandflies, will develop boils on their skin, just like smallpox or chickenpox. Not only that, when we go down for Pindabat every day, for alms round, we also meet with a lot of leeches. You know what leeches are? If you're not careful, they will climb up your legs all the way up to your anus and go into your stomach, and then stay there and be a parasite. So you can see that the jungle is actually teeming with life, with animal life. Millions of ants and insects and animals of all sorts. We also have a long-standing wild boar problem. It is because of wild boars that we have leeches, because the leeches will attach themselves to wild boars and have their meal. And then when they are full, they will just detach themselves and they'll be hanging around at the pathway waiting for us to walk by. Human population is actually negligible compared to the population of earlier on. You have been studying about karma, about cause and effect, and you will know that it is because of the good deeds that you have done in the past that generated your rebirth here as a human being. Nowadays, past life regression or past life therapy is becoming very popular in the world. Do you know what is past life therapy? Do you know what is past life regression? You don't know. Psychotherapists sometimes meet with patients who have inexplicable phobias. Some people are very scared of water. Some people are very scared of heights. Some people are very scared of certain things which normal people are not scared of. And they try to regress their patients by hypnosis, regressing their consciousness back to maybe their childhood. Maybe they had very nasty childhood experiences, some traumas that had been embedded in their unconscious, in their subconscious. And so they are scared of certain things in a very inexplicable way. However, sometimes by regressing them to their early childhood does not seem to solve the problem. Then they regress them to a previous lifetime, previous existence. Modern psychotherapists who utilize this technique of past life regression have been successful in curing their patients of their inexplicable behavior and phobias. When you regress them to a past life, then they sort of relive the trauma that they went through. For example, there may be a patient who has an inexplicable hatred for the parents. Of course, she might be a Buddhist, she might have attended all these courses and know how important it is to be grateful to one's parents. But there is an uncontrollable emotion in that person. Unconscious, uncontrollable, maybe hatred for the parents for no apparent reason. Even regression to childhood days does not show that the present parents did anything bad to that child. And yet, that child cannot get over that, even until he or she may be a young adult, maybe in her 20s or 30s. Still, the feeling of anger, resentment, and hatred for the parents may still be lurking behind in the subconscious. When you go to see a psychotherapist and then you regress back to past lives, then this patient, buried in her subconscious, would relive a traumatic experience that she had had with the parents before in a past life. Maybe in a past life they were the enemies and had done something very bad to her before. And so right now, that's why there's this inexplicable hatred and resentment. But once they go through that experience again, relive that experience, that traumatic experience that they had many lifetimes ago, the hypnotist or the psychotherapist will try to guide the patient to accept the situation and to forgive. So at that level of subconscious guidance, when the patient comes out of hypnosis, he or she may not be able to remember it, but it has been embedded subconsciously, and after that, her relationship with the parents improve because of forgiveness. Many of these past life accounts tell us that majority of patients, when they recall their past life through hypnosis, recall only human lives. They don't recall animal lives. They don't recall life as an insect or as an animal. Why do you think that is so? In one sutta called Bala Pandita Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, Bala means a fool, Pandita means a wise person. So, fool, wise person, sutta. In that sutta, the Buddha talked about how difficult it is for animals to do good deeds so that they can come back or be reborn as human beings. You must have learned about the 10 bases of meritorious actions. Have you learned that? The 10 good deeds of doing dana, observing your sila, doing service. What else? Having Dhamma discussion, listening to the Dhamma, teaching the Dhamma, meditation, and so forth. There are 10 of these meritorious deeds. You've also heard, I suppose, of the 10 paramitas, right? So these are all good deeds that can be done by a human being. Do you think that an animal would have any chance of doing dana, of observing sila, of listening to the Dhamma talk and understanding what it's all about? No, right? So once you become an animal, it's very, very, very difficult to come back as a human being. So that may be the reason why hypnotists or psychotherapists who regress patients in the past lives hardly ever report of patients who can recall a non-human animal life. Because once you become an animal, it's almost impossible to become a human being again. In Bala Pandita Sutta, the Buddha gave the analogy or simile of the blind turtle and the yolk. Do you know what's a yolk? Not the yolk of an egg. I don't suppose people in Malaysia would know what a yolk is because we hardly have any bullock carts around. But in Thailand and in Burma, those of you who have seen carts before, bullock carts, will know that when a bull or a cow is pulling a cart, they have got to attach something to the neck so they can pull the cart. In Thailand and Burma, they don't use a yoke like what they do in the West. A yoke is something like there's a hole there. You can slip into the neck of the animal. Then you can harness that to your cart, and as the animal moves, it will pull the cart along. So that's a yoke, right? To use a modern analogy, it's like a tire. You throw a tire into the sea. And then in the sea, there is this blind turtle who comes out once in 100 years. Comes out to the surface once in 100 years. What is the possibility of this turtle, this blind turtle, surfacing right into the tire? What is the possibility? Once in 100 years, this blind turtle will come to the surface, and then coincidentally on one occasion, then the head would be in the middle of the tire. The possibility is very, very small, isn't it? Very, very small indeed. That's why in the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, blessed is the human birth. Blessed is the appearance of a Buddha. Blessed is listening to Dhamma. And blessed is harmony of those who practice the spiritual path. So it's a blessing, to be a human being. And once people become human beings, sometimes because of ignorance, because you don't know how difficult it is to become a human being, we become heedless for many reasons. Perhaps we were born under circumstances where we were not exposed to good moral standards. Perhaps we were, but we are too obsessed with our selfish desires to take notice, and so we create a lot of bad karma. What is the sort of bad karma that can result in birth as an animal or a ghost or in hell? Basically, it is the breaking of the 5 precepts. If one breaks the 5 precepts intentionally by taking life, taking what is not given, by committing sexual misconduct, by lying and causing loss to another person, or by getting intoxicated, by taking drugs and so forth, then one creates the karmic potential for rebirth as an animal or a ghost. In several suttas, the Buddha talked about the 10 types of bad conduct, the 10 types of duccarita. I think the 5 precepts are also included in this, but there are additional things as well. It has got to do with the body, speech, and the mind. So for the body, if one takes life, one takes what is not given, and one commits sexual misconduct. These 3, they are under bodily action. Then under verbal action, we have telling a lie, talking divisive speech, speech that divides people who are in harmony. You tell tales to make them disunited. Then you use harsh or crude language to talk with people, to scold people, to address people in a harsh or crude way. Next one is getting involved in idle chatter. That means talking things that are no benefit at all. I understand that nowadays young university students will go to the mama stall and sit until 2, 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. in the morning and just sit there and just talk nonsense. Nothing really beneficial. That is the sort of thought that Buddha is referring to. Then the next 3 refers to mental actions. And what are they? If one has wrong view, if one has covetousness, you know what is being covetous? Person who is covetous is one who desires something that belongs to somebody else and wanting to possess that somebody else's property illegally. He hasn't said anything nor done anything, but it's just a thought that arose in the mind, wanting or desiring something that belongs to somebody else and wanting to procure it. And that something that belongs to somebody else could be something animate or inanimate. It could be somebody else's girlfriend and you want to possess her. Even the thought of doing that before actually doing it is really an unwholesome thing. And the other one is ill will. harboring thoughts of ill will towards another person, wanting to take revenge, wanting to cause harm to another person. You may think that these things don't happen, but let me tell you a story that happened about 20 years ago. That time I was with Sadhu Pandita, helping out in a retreat in the US, in the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. There was one lady yogi, very bad-tempered woman, and she was meditating in the hall with everybody else. She was supposed to be practicing meditation, vipassana meditation, being aware of whatever that arises in your field of awareness, let them go and come back to your primary object, trying to look at things in an objective way. One day she came for interview, and then she reported that she was sitting there on a cushion, and then she saw her enemy sitting in another cushion somewhere else. So when you're doing vipassana meditation, when you see something or you think of something, you just be aware of that and let it go. Don't indulge in the thought or in what you see. Don't proliferate with a lot of concepts or thoughts of what you see or hear through your five senses. But instead of doing that, she was sitting there, she saw her enemy, and then all these associations, the thoughts of what her enemy had done to her in the past came, and she got very angry. And so she imagined, visualized her enemy in front of her, and she was chopping her up to pieces and killing her. In meditation, doing killing meditation. So that sort of mental activity that's going on in the mind is one of the 10 types of evil conduct. If we divide them into bodily, verbal, and mental action, you have 3 bodily, 4 verbal, and 3 mental. So even having such thoughts can be the cause for one to be reborn in an unhappy existence. Okay, all of you are young people. I'm sure that when you were younger, you had broken the 5 precepts. When I was young, I was a very cruel boy. I used to catch cockroaches and then put them in a charcoal fire and enjoy the smell of them burning to death. Terrible, isn't it? I don't know when I have to repay back that karma. Well, we have done a lot of good things and bad things in our life. And the law of karma is that you will have to reap what you sow. You have heard of Lampo Charan? He's a meditation teacher, and he has lots and lots of students. And he's got lots and lots of stories about his students. So this is a very interesting story. Since that there was this Vietnamese man, he was a butcher. And so, being a butcher, he had to kill a lot of animals. And he never had any respect for monks nor for Buddhism. He stayed in Thailand. One fine day, he met a forest monk, and he was immediately inspired by that forest monk, full of respect. It's very strange because he never had any respect for monks, he never believed in Buddhism, but when he met that forest monk, he suddenly felt a deep sense of respect for that monk. He approached that monk, gave him food, served him, and eventually they got very close. This is one instance of karmic affinity. These two must have been very good friends before in the past. They had been a teacher-pupil relationship in the past. So that's why when he met him, immediately he had so much respect and faith in that forest monk. So the forest monk asked him about what he was doing, and when he found out that he was a butcher, he tried to persuade him to change his occupation, which he did. He listened to the forest monk, he changed his occupation, and eventually he himself became a forest monk. He had this Thai forest monk umbrella with mosquito netting around, and he took to the forest and he sat under the tree and meditated. At that time he was taught samatha meditation, just reciting Buddho, Buddho. Breathe in, you recite Bud, you breathe out, you recite Tho. So he was doing samatha meditation, just doing Buddho for several years, staying in the forest, going for alms round, staying alone, secluded. But he never really got anywhere. So one fine day, a deva, a spirit, appeared to him while he was meditating and told him, you know, you have done a lot of bad karma and you have to repay your karmic debt. By doing samatha meditation, you cannot repay this karmic debt. If you want to repay your karmic debt, then you must go to Wat Amphawan, go and see Long Po Charan at Singpuri. But he has never heard of Wat Amphawan, he's never been to Singpuri, he doesn't know the way. But the Deva guided him there until he got to the temple, to the meditation center. At that time, Long Po Charan was conducting a retreat for university students, like all of you. And so this young monk approached Long Po, requested for permission to meditate in the center. So Long Po taught him Vipassana. Long Po said, okay, you can still do Buddha, but when your mind is calm, you should also try to observe what is happening to your five senses, including your mind. Initially, the first day was okay. After that, the following few days, it was a very bizarre thing that happened in that center. Everybody was shocked to see him crawl on the floor and rolling and squealing and crying like a pig, like a cow that was being tortured or being killed. And he felt so much pain in his body whenever he sat, like people were cutting him into pieces. But Long Po Charan managed to convince him this was the karma that you have to repay. He was very obedient. He listened to Long Po Charan's instructions. He watched his feelings, his Vedana, watched his mental reaction, watched all the painful feelings that he had, endured them patiently, and he went beyond that. While this was happening, many of the students were very scared. They say, oh, if I do Vipassana meditation, I'll end up like that. Matiro, susah. And many of them wanted to quit. But luckily, Long Po Charan managed to convince them that this doesn't happen to everyone. Right? So if you have done a lot of bad deeds before in the past life, or in this very life, and you're doing Vipassana meditation, you have to pay for it. It's something that you cannot escape. But once you pay for it, you endure it, be aware of it, and you go beyond it, then you can make good progress. And that's what happened to this monk. After he went through that period of excruciating, unbearable pain, it seems that he attained quite a high state of spiritual attainment. He went back to Vietnam, started a meditation center, and started to teach his people. And after several years, he disappeared. It seems that he went back to the forest and continued his practice so that he can attain higher stages. So whatever we do in this life, in this precious human life, all the good things and bad things that we do, they don't just dissipate. All these actions, karma, and you create the karmic potential. It's just waiting for the right moment to ripen. If you study physics, you know that if somebody put a teapot here, the moment you lift this teapot from the ground to put here, you are creating a potential energy. And that potential energy is there, it's potential only. One fine day somebody is going to drop this teapot, and when it does that, then it goes back to zero. So this is the same principle that applies to karma, to action, to all your physical, verbal and mental actions that you have done. You create the potential. It is there waiting for the right time to ripen. When will it ripen? That's why being a human being is not plain sailing. It's not happiness all the time. Sometimes we feel happy, sometimes we feel comfortable, sometimes we are beset by illness, by painful feelings, and things go wrong in our life. Not because of all the good and bad karma that we have done before in the past. It could be past but in this lifetime, or past in a previous lifetime. So all these things are accumulating, and we can never really know when which karma will ripen. And this is particularly crucial just before you die. Just before you die, the last few moments before your death, what happens will determine your next existence. If before you die you happen to think of an evil deed that you did before, you regretted over something that you had done wrong, and with that state of mind, filled with remorse, filled with anger or unforgiving nature of the mind, and you die, then you'll be reborn in a lower state of existence, either as a hungry ghost or an animal or in hell. Who can guarantee that your mind can be calm and peaceful and thinking of only wholesome deeds just before you die? Can you guarantee that? No. We can only talk in terms of possibilities and probabilities. You have done so many good deeds before, and you have done even more bad deeds before. And the more good deeds you do, the more you are making the possibility of having wholesome thoughts just before you die. If you do a lot of bad deeds, you are increasing the possibility that you're going to regret and have remorse before you die. Earlier on, I talked about the 10 types of bad conduct: physical, verbal, and mental. But then again, from the ultimate point of view, we can classify what is good and bad according to the motivation behind what we do, speak, or think. And these are dependent on the 3 roots of lobha, dosa, and moha. If you do something with attachment, with anger, with delusion, then that deed, whether it's physical, verbal, or mental, is considered unwholesome, and it increases the possibility of your gaining rebirth in a woeful realm. And it's very easy to determine whether your state of mind is wholesome or unwholesome if the mind is unhappy. If you're unhappy, you feel sad, you feel regret, you feel unpleasant in your mind emotionally. It means that that is an unwholesome state of mind. If that sort of unwholesome state of mind persists just before you die, then the possibility of your taking a lower realm of existence next life is very, very high. Then there is also the feeling of attachment, being attached to people or things. If you die with attachment to people or things, then you can be reborn as a ghost, haunting the place where you're attached to. So that's why counselors, people who counsel dying patients, Buddhist counselors, are taught to try to convince the dying patient to let go of all attachments, let go of all grudges. If you hold any grudge against anyone, if you're unforgiving, then that itself is an unwholesome state of mind that can lead to a bad rebirth. Now, before you reach that point of time of death, don't you think that it's better for us to learn techniques to be able to control the mind so that we can let go of grudges, be forgiving, let go of attachments? If somebody wants to cross a river in a sampan, it's better for him to learn how to swim first, right? Don't wait until the sampan capsizes in the middle of the sea or the river and then start to learn how to swim. You'll panic and you won't be able to do anything. So it's the same. If we understand that what happens during the last moments of our life will determine our future existence, then we had better learn how to manage our mind. How do you learn how to manage your mind? Any suggestions? Learn meditation, particularly Satipatthana meditation or mindfulness meditation, to be able to see your mind states in an objective way and letting go of whatever that is pleasant or unpleasant. There are many stories of people who are supposed to be very good. They are very pious people who make a lot of merits, doing a lot of dana, observing Sila. And then in their last moments, just before they die, they think of something bad that they had done, a small little incident in the past, and then they dwell on it with remorse, and then they die. So what happens to them? What do you think happens to them? There's this story of Queen Malika. She was the chief consort of King Basenadi of Kosala. She was supposed to be a very pious woman, doing a lot of dana, observing Sila and so forth. But at one time she had done something wrong, a sexual misconduct. And towards the end of her life, she dwelled with remorse over this misdeed, and because of that she was reborn in hell. King Basenadi was very sad that his favorite consort had died, and knowing that she's a very pious lady, came to see the Buddha and to ask the Buddha where Queen Malika had been born. But the Buddha, knowing that she had been born in hell, didn't want to tell him, because if he had told him that she had been born in hell, what do you think would have happened? Yeah, he would have lost faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. It's just in spite of my wife, doing dana every time, observing precepts, being such a well-behaved woman, now she's born in hell. So what's the point of being good? So the Buddha made him forget what he wanted to ask. So when he came to the Buddha's presence, he paid respect to the Buddha, and then he said, "Bhante, I wanted to ask you something, but I've forgotten." So he went back home. And then when he went back home, he remembered. He came back the next day, and the same thing happened to him. He forgot all about it for 7 days. And finally, on the 7th day, Queen Malika died and was reborn in heaven. So when she was reborn in heaven, and King Basenadi came to ask the question again, the Buddha did not make him forget. So he came and asked, "Now my wife, she has been such a wonderful lady, such a pious lady, she has died. Where is she born?" And then the Buddha says, "Oh, she's born in heaven." Now, after 7 days in hell, because of the last thought moment. Then there is another story of a monk, a very virtuous monk, who was given a brand new set of robes. He hung up the robes and he was sleeping and thinking, next day I'm going to wear these brand new robes. And it happens that that night he died suddenly, maybe of a heart attack or something. And because he had attachment to the robe, he was reborn as a flea on the robe, attached to the robe. Now, it's normal practice that if a monk dies, then his property belongs to the Sangha. And so the community will meet to divide his property, who should get what. So on that day, after he had been cremated, the members of the Sangha got together with his possessions, and they were about to distribute his possessions, including the robe. And then the poor flea was clinging to the robe and protesting, "Don't you touch my robe, don't you touch my robe." Being a flea attached to the robe, he didn't want anyone to touch his new robe. The Buddha at that time heard this little flea shouting and protesting with his divine ear, and so he stopped the monks from distributing his property. They waited for about 7 days, and then the monk died as a flea and was reborn in heaven. So if you're a very virtuous person and you die with an unwholesome state of mind, you can still go down to the lower worlds, but perhaps not too long. On the other hand, there's a story of a person who was a public executioner for 50 years. He used to chop people's head off. And then on his 50th year, he was awarded a pension. He was relieved of his duty because he was too old already. When he was younger, he could just cut off the head at one stroke. But now he has to cut many strokes, you see, so he tortured the poor victims. So the king relieved him of his job and got a stronger man to be an executioner. So on that day, he wanted to celebrate his pension. He dressed very well and cooked his best food and was about to eat it when he saw Venerable Sariputta coming for alms round, standing outside his house. When he saw Venerable Sariputta, he was very happy, and instead of eating his favorite food, he invited Venerable Sariputta in and decided to offer the food to Venerable Sariputta instead. After offering the food, And then Venerable Sariputta ate his meal, at the end of which he gave a little talk. As he was giving the Dhamma talk, he noticed that this person was very distracted. He's very distracted. Why? Because as he was listening to the talk, images of all the people that he killed appeared to him. And that distracted his attention, so he could not concentrate on what Venerable Sariputta was trying to say. Seeing that he was not paying attention, Venerable Sariputta asked him, "What's the matter?" He says, "Bhante, I can't concentrate on your talk because, I keep thinking of all those people that I had executed." Venerable Sariputta asked him, "Did you execute these people on your own accord, by yourself, or of your own will?" Then he said, "No, Bhante, the king ordered me to do it." "In that case, were you in the wrong?" Venerable Sariputta asked him. And then this guy thought about it. He said, "Yeah lah, after all it was the king who asked me to do it. Why should I be blamed for it? The king was in the wrong because he asked me to do it." So after that, he felt more relieved, no remorse, so he could listen to what the Venerable Sariputta was trying to tell him. Venerable Sariputta gave him a gradual discourse leading to meditation and about the Four Noble Truths. As he was listening to the talk, he progressed spiritually until he was almost becoming a Sotapan, almost becoming enlightened. But I guess that was because of his bad karma that prevented him from getting enlightened. So he didn't get enlightened, but he was almost there, at the threshold of enlightenment. After the talk was over, he followed Venerable Sariputta out, carried his bowl for a short way, and on his way back to his dwelling, he was gored to death by a cow. It seems that this cow was someone that he had executed before. The spirit possessed this cow and then charged and killed him. So when he died, some monks went to ask the Buddha, because they knew that he was a public executioner. He had just retired after 50 years of service. And then when he was celebrating his retirement, Venerable Sariputta went there, took his alms food and gave a talk. And then now he's died immediately after that. So they asked the Buddha, what happened to him after he died? Where is he now? And the Buddha said, well, this person is very lucky to have a good friend, a Kalyana Mitta, because Venerable Sariputta gave him a Dhamma talk. After he died, he went to heaven instead of going down to hell. After killing so many people, being a public executioner for 50 years, he went to heaven instead of going down to hell. Of course, he cannot put all the blame on the king, because even if the king ordered him to execute the prisoners, he was the one who actually killed. So he also had the intention. And so both of them were in the wrong, the king as well as the executioner. But because just before he died, he was probably thinking about the Dhamma that he had realized, and there was a wholesome thought. That's why he was reborn in heaven. But it doesn't mean that all his bad deeds will be erased. One fine day, he will give results. Another story is that of Angulimala, which I'm sure all of you are aware of. And that comes from the sutta itself. As you know, Angulimala means finger garland. This guy is a serial killer, and he had killed hundreds of people. And he wore the finger of the person he killed and made into a garland. That's why it's called Angulimala. Anguli means finger and mala means a garland of fingers. One day, it seems that the Buddha took compassion on him. The Buddha also knew that he had some potential, some great potential to become liberated in this life. The Buddha knew that he was actually hiding behind some bushes along a road, preying on people who walked that path and killing them. So the Buddha purposely walked along that path. Before he went there, people had already warned the Buddha, Bhante, don't go that direction, there's a serial killer hiding behind there in a forest grove. It will be no match for him. But the Buddha just ignored them and he just walked towards there. And Angulimala saw him. Then after the Buddha passed him, Angulimala tried to kill the Buddha. But the Buddha made use of his psychic power to create a psychic feat. Although the Buddha was walking at a normal pace, in a gentle, mindful manner, and Angulimala was running like mad, trying to chase him, he could not catch up with the Buddha. So this to him was something very strange. And he said, monk, stop. So the Buddha said, I have already stopped. You should stop. Then he accused the Buddha, how can you tell a lie? You haven't stopped, you're still walking. How can you say you have stopped? He says, no, I've stopped. I've stopped from creating bad karma, from killing people. You haven't stopped yet. You are still doing all these bad things. You should stop. So he was very inspired by what the Buddha said. Then eventually he became a monk. And then the news got around to King Pasenadi that this serial killer had become a monk. In fact, before that, the king was given an ultimatum by the people. You are the king. You should go and arrest this fellow because he is creating a lot of fear among people. People are all getting very restless and protesting to the king, maybe having a demonstration. So the king very reluctantly was dressed in armor and with all his soldiers were going to catch this single person. And then as he was going there, he heard the news that Angulimala had become a monk. So he went to see the Buddha. As he went towards the Buddha with all his army behind him, of course he put down his sword before he went to the Buddha's presence, and he bowed to the Buddha. The Buddha asked him, where are you going, dressed up like you are going for a battle? And he says, no, people are getting very restless. They are demanding that as king I should catch hold of this serial killer because it's causing a lot of fear among people. Then the Buddha says, what if this so-called serial killer, this Angulimala, had become a monk? Then what would you do? Then he said, I will be very happy and I would invite him to ask for the 4 requisites: food, shelter, clothing, and medicine. Then the Buddha said, that's good. See there, look at the monk sitting next to me. He is Angulimala. And then the king got a shock and he was very scared. He was shivering and sweating because Angulimala was just seated next to the Buddha. And he had heard so much of Angulimala, the serial killer. Then the Buddha says, it's okay, great king, don't be afraid. He's now a monk and he wouldn't even harm a fly. So at that time, the king had to keep his promise. So he bowed to Angulimala and invited him to ask for the 4 requisites. But Angulimala was a serial killer. He had killed hundreds of people. When he became a monk, he had to go for alms round, going from house to house to beg for food. When people saw him coming, they closed their doors and then ran away, and he couldn't get enough food to eat. One day he was going around Pindabat, alms round, and then he saw a woman suffering because of labor pains. She was at the verge of giving birth and she was suffering. So when he saw that, he felt compassion and he went to report to the Buddha. And then the Buddha said, this is amazing. You have killed so many people, and now only when you see a woman in labor pains, you are having compassion for her. But anyway, he gave Angulimala a little asseveration of truth. He said, okay, in that case, if you have compassion for women who are pregnant, who are giving birth, then you should recite this asseveration of truth. You know what's an asseveration of truth? Okay, I'll describe to you this verse so that you can find out what it means. He says, sister, since I was born, I have not intentionally taken life. By the power of this truth, may you be safe and so may your baby. Then Angulimala says, Bhante, but they will be lying. I've taken so many lives since I was born. So the Buddha says, okay, then we change it to, since I was born as an Arya, as a noble one, I have not intentionally taken life. By the power of this truth, may you be safe, may your baby be safe. But actually that was given to him before he attained enlightenment. So when the Buddha used the word Arya, it does not mean that he has already become an Arya. It means that he has joined the ranks of the noble ones. He has become a monk. Now, it's very strange because that Angulimala Paritta, although it was given specifically to Angulimala, can also be used these days. There are many instances where pregnant ladies have come to me and asked me to chant this for them because their baby doesn't want to turn. The head is not turned, so they have difficulty giving birth. They have to go for cesarean operation. So they come running for help. We chant the Angulimala Parita, hold the water while we are chanting. They take back the water, drink, and within a short time, the fetus will turn. It's very strange, we don't know how it works. There was this woman, who took a scope in the morning. He went for an ultrasound scope, and the fetus had not turned yet. Then, after she got our water, she drank it. In the evening, she went for a scope. Baby had turned already. So it's strange how this works, because this was given to Angulimala, not to us. But we recite it, and still it works. So what happened was that after Angulimala became an arahant, liberated of all the defilements, as he was going for alms round, people throw stones, not necessarily at him. Maybe there's a stray dog or stray cat around. They throw the stone at the dog or the cat, but instead of hitting the dog and the cat, it will hit him. It's not intentional, no, they don't intend to hit him, but it will hit him. And then sometimes when he's walking along for Bindabat, somebody throw rubbish over the hedge, it also land on top of him. What does this show? It shows that although he has become an arahant, he's got no more lobha, dosa and moha within him. But because of the bad deeds that he had done in this life, he cannot run away from it. After enlightenment also, you have to repay your debts. So that's why people who are doing vipassana meditation, you have to repay their debts. If you are a very cruel person, you have done a lot of bad deeds before, tortured a lot of people, inflicted harm to a lot of people, you will have to endure all this, experience all this. We have done so many good things and bad things in life. When these things were done, we created the karmic potential. And the karmic potential is always waiting for the right time. We cannot erase the bad things that we have done. Angulimala could not erase it. But we can do as much good as we can to dilute the bad things that we did. The Buddha gave a simile. He says, imagine if you were to take a pinch of salt and put it into a glass of water. Do you think the glass of water would feel a bit salty? It would, right? And you take the same pinch of salt and you put it into the river. Do you think it's going to make any difference? No, right? So he said, if you do a lot of good deeds, then the bad deeds will be negligible compared to the good deeds that you have done. So that when you die, the possibility of thinking about bad deeds that you have done is less, very much less, than thinking of the good deeds that you have done. So one good strategy is to do as much good as possible and do as little bad deeds as possible. The next strategy is to learn how to practice meditation. That is important because even though we try as much as possible to do good deeds, still that's the sort of thing that can happen, when you die. Surprise! You are caught in an accident or you lie in coma in the hospital. What can you do? Just now upon arrival, some devotees came to see me and they were talking about nowadays more and more people are getting cancer at a very young age. And then they always ask themselves, first questions they will ask is, why me? I'm so young, I'm only 25, I'm only 30, I've just begun to live the life. Why must I have cancer? Why must I die of cancer at such a young age? So one of the meditations that one should try to practice also is meditation on the imminence of death. Every day you contemplate, one fine day I'm going to die, and it could be any time, not necessarily until when I'm 70. It could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be just after I get out from this sitting, it could be any time. Death is just round the corner. And this is one of the meditations that is taught by the Buddha. There's one sutta where the Buddha says that everyone, whether it's a woman or a man, female disciple or male disciple, or a bhikkhuni or a bhikkhu, should reflect on these 5 things frequently. And what are these 5 things? The first thing is that you are not free from illness. One fine day, you are going to get sick. You are not free from old age. Although you are young and robust now, one day you will become wrinkled. And then whatever things that you cherish, that you like, will be separated from you, whether it's animate or inanimate, whether it's your favorite pair of jeans, or your favorite CD or VCD, or your best friend, or your girlfriend, or your spouse, or your children. One fine day, they will be separated from you. The next thing to think about is death. One fine day, you're going to die. You have not gone beyond death yet. Finally, you also think about karma, that you are the owners of your own karma. And karma are your true relatives. When you are sick, very sick, get terminal cancer or something, there's no one who can come and tell you, no one who, even a very compassionate person like your mother or father, maybe they're old already, they say, oh, we are old already, you are just in the prime of your life, you give me the cancer, we die, we already so old already, then you live on. Can you do that? Nobody can take away your appointment with death, but there are exceptions to the rule. One interesting story again from Longpo Charan. He says there was this man in Thailand. He was a taxi driver. In his young age, he used to travel along the river to get goods from Bangkok to his town, because he was also at that time doing some business with his wife. He sat in a ferry boat, going back and forth. He was carrying goods from Bangkok. And then in the middle of the night, he was sleeping near the engine room, covered up in a canvas, because the people who were driving the boat fell asleep. So the boat knocked into a rock, capsized, and a lot of people were drowned. Because he was in the engine room and he was covered with canvas, he could not free himself from the canvas. He was underwater and was drowning. And then he made a wish, I want to be free. I don't want to die, because right now I'm still young, I've got a lot of things to do. If I can be saved now, I will ordain as a monk. And then miraculously, after he made that vow, he could free himself from the canvas and he escaped. After he made that vow, he forgot all about it. He didn't think of becoming a monk. When he was 24, that happened. And then 22 years later, when he was 46, he had a very, very bad dream. Some beings were coming to take him away. He was resisting, he didn't want to go. He says, no, not my time yet, I don't want to go. But they were trying to pull him for 3 consecutive nights. And then, on the final night, one of the beings dressed in red told him, he says, remember, when you were young, you made a vow. You did not fulfill your vow. That's why we're going to take you away. And then he said, I can't remember what I did. Then he reminded him, you remember when you were caught in the sampan and you made a vow that you want to become monk? If you don't fulfill the vow, we're going to take you away. Then he said, I cannot become a monk. Who is going to organize my daughter's wedding? I got so much children to take care of, I got a wife to take care of. And then the being says, no way, you made your vow, you better fulfill it. So we give you a grace period of 2 years. After that, he was very unhappy, very, very unhappy. Actually, he was Longpo Charan's driver. When Longpo Charan wanted to go anywhere, when the monastery at that time didn't have any vehicles, he would ask him and they would pay him and he would take him around. He told his friend, and then his friend brought him to see Longpo and told him about it. And then Longpo said, yeah, you better become a monk. Longpo actually gave him the set of requisites, but he kept postponing it. And then they bargained with him. Finally, he said, okay, after my daughter's marriage, then I'll become a monk. But after his daughter's marriage, also he did not become a monk. Again, he had another dream. This time says, okay, it's time already. Time is running out. You better become a monk. He didn't want to become a monk. Then in that case, exactly 24 years later, you will die. And you will die in a road accident. Longpo says, you better become a monk. If you become a monk, you won't die. You won't be driving. You won't die in a road accident. But again, he did not heed Longpo's advice. And so, on the appointed day, he died in a motor accident, just as the being told him. When you make a vow, you better make sure that you fulfill it. This one happened in Thailand, but I also know of someone in Malaysia who also made a vow to become a monk, and he was saved from unpleasant circumstances. But after that, he did not fulfill his vow, and so he died of cancer. Being born as a human being is a rare opportunity, and once being a human being, you do not try to do as much good deeds as possible, you are actually losing a great opportunity. And if you do a lot of bad deeds, and at the last moment of death, if you think of the bad deeds that you do, dwell upon them with remorse and regret, you may be reborn as an animal. And once you are an animal, it's very difficult to get out of the animal kingdom, because animals can hardly do any good deeds. This morning we talk about dana, how dana can give you those things in return: long life, happiness, beauty, strength, and intelligence. But in the Janusoni Sutta in Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha was explaining to this Brahmin called Janusoni. He says, here, Brahmin, there are some people who do a lot of dana, but they do not observe the 10 good conduct, opposite of the 10 evil conduct. 3 bodily conduct, 4 verbal conduct, and 3 mental conduct. He does not observe the 5 precepts. Speaks in order to divide people, uses harsh language and hurts other people, indulges in frivolous talk. And then he has wrong view, covets other people's property, he has ill will and harmful thoughts. So such a person, of course, if you do dana, you will get the results. But because he did not observe his sila, his morality, this person, after he dies, may not be reborn as a human being. He could be reborn in the animal kingdom as a royal elephant, a royal stallion, a wealthy person's pet dog or pet cat, and he can enjoy all the pleasures of the senses. A royal elephant can enjoy a lot of things. He's bathed every day by royal attendants, he's dressed up in finery and gets to eat good food. So does a royal stallion. In Dasnaraka Buddhist Sanctuary, we have 4 cats and a few dogs. They must have done a lot of dana before in the past. And one of our cats is a very choosy cat. You give him food, he won't eat anything but fish. You give him fried fish every day, next day he won't eat already. And he prefers to go and catch grasshoppers and catch even squirrels, catch birds and eat them. So you can see that if you do a lot of dana but do not observe your precepts, you can be reborn as a pet cat or a pet dog of a wealthy person. And then you can stay in a luxurious mansion, enjoying all the luxuries that the people in the house enjoy. But you have no chance to do good deeds. If you're reborn as a carnivorous animal, even worse. You're reborn as a tiger, you have to kill to eat. If you're born as a goat or as a cow, it's not so bad, vegetarian, you don't kill anybody. So if you have to be reborn as an animal, make sure you become a vegetarian animal, not a carnivorous one. Not only is it important to do dana, but it's also important to do sila. Sila is what that determines where you're going to reborn. Dana will determine the quality of life where you are born. Whether you'll be wealthy, you'll enjoy the pleasures of the senses or not. It depends on how much dana you did in the past. So you must do both. And bhavana is also very important, because if you don't know how to control your mind, then... So now it's question time. Question is, we are taught anatta, there's no soul. And yet, when we talk about rebirth, we say that a person after he dies is reborn as an animal or a human being or a spirit. How can one explain that? What is it that passes from one existence to another? First of all, we have got to understand what is meant by anatta, non-self. The Buddha says that there is no such thing as an unchanging, permanent self, because everything is in a state of flux. If you watch yourself, you know that you are growing all the time. You're not the same person as when you were when you came out from your mother's womb. When you were younger, you had a different set of thoughts. And now you have a different set of thoughts. Your mind is changing all the time. You can see how fast your mind changes from moment to moment, how your emotion changes from moment to moment. You cannot be happy all the time, you cannot be sad all the time. And whatever sadness that you have, or happiness that you have also, won't last forever. They will persist for some time and then they will dissipate. So to hold that there is something permanent behind all this change that transfers from one existence to another is a wrong view. But what is the difference between your personality now and maybe 5 years ago and 5 years later? It will also change according to many circumstances, according to your environment, according to what you read, according to how you practice yourself, according to your food, the climate. Now, a lot of things are involved in this conditioning of what our personality is like. So, when a person dies, the same thing continues. This flux of change also continues in the next lifetime. It is still changing. It's not something permanent. You were different before, and you're different now, and you'll be different later, and you'll be different in the next life. Despite this difference, there is also an underlying continuity or connectedness. For example, certain talents, certain dispositions, certain characteristics. They follow you from existence to existence. We've all heard of child prodigies. You know, Beethoven, Mozart, these famous composers, they were child prodigies. Beethoven composed a symphony at a very young age. You have heard of people who are very gifted in painting, very gifted in athletics, in sports. You may be inspired by them. You try very hard to train to become like them, but you can never be like them. Why? Because you don't have the talent. So where did the talent come from? It came from the past. It's because it has been developed in the past, that's why it's carried forward to this present existence. But everything is in a state of change, and even that talent can be developed from lifetime to lifetime. So there's no permanent, unchanging entity or substance that transmigrates from one lifetime to another. But it's this set of things that are changing all the time. It changes until the end, and then it changes again in the next existence. So it's just phenomena that changes all the time with certain relationship between one another. Although they change all the time, they are not random change. They are changes that are connected with causality. We can also use the word soul in a sense that it is a changing phenomena. It's not something permanent. For example, have you heard of astral traveling? When people sleep, sometimes they find that they are up at the ceiling there, looking down. Sometimes they can travel here and there. That is astral traveling. This may not be in Theravada Buddhism, but in the Indian system of belief, our physical bodies are existing in several layers at one time. And the physical body is only one layer. There are actually 7 layers superimposed on one another. You have the physical body, you have the emotional body, you have the mental body, you have the astral body, you have the ethereal body, you have the divine body, and so forth. They have different layers of body. When you go astral traveling, your physical body is sleeping on the bed, but your astral body is actually traveling to various places, experiencing certain things. A psychic once told me, when a person dies, his physical body dies first, whereas the other layers do not die yet. It doesn't mean that it is a soul, because these 7 layers are coexisting when a person is alive, physically alive. When a person dies, his physical body is dead, but the other layers are still around. That's why you can see ghosts. Sometimes people have near-death experience when they are in hospital and then suddenly they die of heart attack. And then the nurses try to resuscitate them, put them electric shocks, and then they jump and then they come back to life, right? They will tell you that while they are supposed to be dead, they are not dead. They are outside there at the ceiling looking at the nurses trying to revive them. And then because of the shock, suddenly they find themselves, pop, they are back into the body. So these are the findings of modern research scientists. So it seems that Consciousness is also linked to our body, and the so-called personality that makes up a person comprises the body as well as the mind, your mental state and your physical body. But when a physical body dies, the other subtle physical bodies are still alive with the mind. Because attachment has not been eradicated, it's still there. It's looking for the next physical body to be reborn in. And so when the conditions are right, and then maybe you will take rebirth in the mother's womb if it's going to be reborn as a human being. Which means at that time, his other layers would disintegrate, would die off, and then the consciousness would take root in the embryo. The question is, spirits are around us all the time and we may not be able to perceive them. But what is the process involved in spirit possession? How do spirits possess human beings? Are they at the same frequency? I don't know whether they are at the same frequency or not. I don't think people have developed any instrument to measure the frequency of spirits and human beings. But I hear from psychics, different people have got different frequencies, and people who have certain frequencies are prone to spirit possession, to be able to perceive spirits even against their will, where others cannot, because of the frequency thing which we have not been able to detect yet. How it works, I don't really know. I have an example here. A young engineer who was a Buddhist practitioner died, and he was born in the spirit world. Then he had a very strong karmic affinity to a young man, and he used to possess that young man and teach him Buddhism. He taught him the 5 precepts, taught him how to do metta meditation, taught him how to do vipassana meditation, and introduced him to his sifu. But this young man was not very happy to be possessed against his will. Anytime like this spirit felt like it, he would possess him and then take control of his mind, and he was sort of helpless. Although sometimes he may be conscious of what is happening, he was not able to control it, and he didn't quite like it. So eventually he went to see Venerable Sujiva and asked for his help. So Venerable Sujiva said, well, if you really don't want him to possess you, then you must practice full awareness, practice mindfulness meditation. It means be aware all the time. If you're aware all the time and your mind is strong, then the spirit cannot possess you, which was true. Whenever he felt the spirit coming, then he would be fully aware. He would practice full awareness, be mindful of whatever is happening. So it seems that spirits possess people who have weak minds, people who are prone to delusion, who get sleepy very often. When you're sleepy, that's the time when they come in. So if you're wide awake and alert all the time, they cannot come in. The question is whether it's possible for everyone as well as animals to go to nirvana. Well, in terms of infinity, there's no limit to the number of beings who can enter nirvana. But you must understand what nirvana is. It's not a place where you enter, although we use the word enter nirvana. Nirvana means peace, extinction of passions. It means there's no more lobha, dosa, moha. There's no more attachment or greed. There's no more anger or aversion, and there's no more delusion. Nibbana is actually a state, and a person who attains to Nibbana is one who will not be reborn again. It is because of our attachment to life, attachment to existence, attachment to the pleasures of the senses, that we are caught in this cycle of birth and death. Most people who die don't want to die. They just want to cling on. They want to live some more. They want to see their children. They want to see their property. They want to enjoy life even though they're very old, with all the teeth all gone, cannot even chew properly. They still want to live. They are crippled. Also, they still want to live. It's very strange how this attachment to life can be so strong. And it's because of this attachment to life that you just cling to anything that can keep you alive. But once anything comes into being through conditions, it must perish, it must die. And this comes about primarily because of craving, of wanting, of desire. Now the Arahant, the one who has liberated his mind from all these defilements, they do not have any attachment to life, nor do they have any desire for existence, nor would they want to commit suicide. At the end of this human life, they will not be reborn again as another being. So, in our human language, we say that they have entered Nibbana, but actually there's no one who enters Nibbana. If there's anyone who entered Nibbana, that means he's born already, and after that he will have to die again. So an Arahant, after his physical body dissolves, then he does not gain rebirth again. Now, to become an Arahant is not easy because you have to meditate. And so when you ask the question, can all beings, including animals, enter Nibbana? You're trying to say that, can all beings, including animals, attain Arahantship? Do you think it's possible for all of you to attain Arahantship in this life? No. But is it possible for you to attain Arahantship in many, many lifetimes? Maybe, right? So we cannot say with certainty that everybody can. If you put in the effort, and if you are born where the Buddha Sasana is, where you can listen to Dhamma and circumstances are such that you can practice, then perhaps you can get enlightened.